Hello dear viewers, welcome back to our channel, Mid9M. As we venture into another unforgettable journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share our video. Today we invite you to join us in an enigmatic tale that unfolds in the quiet streets of small-town Bennettsville, South Carolina. Amidst the tranquility, something unusual catches our eye: a pristine computer, lowly left in an alley. This computer, though seemingly normal, pulls us into a vortex of secrets and fear. Our curiosity piqued, we unravel stories from the unlikeliest source that send chills down our spines. So buckle up and let's delve into the unknown together. I was playing with a couple of my friends, walking down the empty streets of small-town Bennettsville, South Carolina, when I noticed something out of place in a small alleyway beside the town cafe. I paused. "Hey, is that a computer?" I asked, pretty much talking to myself but earning curious glances from my two friends. "I don't know. Go check it out," Emmy replied, looking at the pile of electronic just inside the alley. I sighed. Of course she would make me go look. I walked carefully as not to fall and bruise something like I always managed to do, and squatted beside the computer looking it over. That's weird. The computer was completely unscathed and seemed to be in pristine condition, even having all of its parts. I picked it up slowly and walked back to my friends. "Let's go to my house and see if it works," I said, breathing a little deeper because of the effort of holding the computer. My other friend, Jeff, laughed at my strained expression. "Let's get something to carry it first," he said, looking around. Being a small town, it wasn't hard to find a small shopping cart rolling around in an abandoned shop. We piled the computer into the shopping cart and headed back towards my house, where we hooked it up and pressed the power button. At first there was nothing but the soft tap of rain against my roof and the whistle of wind across the rusty storm door. Emmy sighed. "Guess that is why they threw it away," she said, disappointment apparent on her face. I was about to reply when suddenly the computer let out a soft hiss, like an angry animal, and the screen slowly began to fade white. There was no startup screen, only a white page with nothing else on it. Then a small file popped up in the middle of the screen, but we knew something was wrong when we saw it. Instead of a small manila folder like it usually has for files, this file was just a bunch of papers lying on the screen, covered in some rusty red color. I stared at the file for a moment. Under it there was a simple title: Blue. Emmy spoke uncertainly from where she watched over my shoulder. "I don't like this," I nodded silently, unable to speak. Jeff, on the other hand, just grinned. "I wonder what it is," he chirped excitedly. I could never understand how Jeff was always so happy about everything. His grin just widened as he saw my confused face. "Click it," he said, leaning down closer over my shoulder. I bit my lip in apprehension but followed his orders, double-clicking the small file. The file opened and showed two text documents with unreadable names and an MP3 file simply named Blue, just like the folder. I looked at the weird text documents, trying to decipher a secret message in the symbols somehow. "This is really weird. Click the song, Cassie," Emmy murmured softly, sounding unsure even to me. I rolled the pointer onto the song's icon but paused. "This doesn't feel right," I said, feeling the urgent need to shut the computer off and to run away as fast as possible. Jeff just rolled his eyes and put his hand over mine on the mouse, double-clicking the MP3. I shivered at his cold touch and looked at the screen. The screen stayed white for a moment, and then suddenly burst into color as pictures of a young boy played alongside a chilling song. I couldn't understand the lyrics of the song, and they seemed to be in a high-pitched, almost Vocaloid-style voice. It had a sad, lonely, and melancholy tone to it, one that reminded me of my grandma, the one who died 5 years ago. Tears came to my eyes and I took a shuddering breath, paying attention to the images. How is this possible? It was an MP3 file, wasn't it? Why are there pictures? I watched as the screen flipped from frame to frame. The first picture was that of a young boy smiling at the camera. Next to him stood a woman whose eyes seemed to be dimmed, almost as if she was dead. Then it showed him sitting in the lap of a man who looked to be in his late 30s. This man's eyes held the same dimness as the woman's, and his hands seemed to hang limply off the side of the chair. The last image was that of the young boy. He stood, eyes dimmed, just like the two before him. He looked around the age of 7 or 8, and he had a defeated look on his face. His pale eyes held nothing but an empty longing as he stared at us from the computer. This image had a static-like texture, and I realized it wasn't an image, but a video. I heard Emmy and Jeff gasp from behind me as the boy blinked, but I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I couldn't even breathe while I looked at him. The boy took a step towards me and I just sat motionless, just barely hearing Emmy and Jeff's screams to run. I watched as his hand reached towards me, that song playing in the background. I felt something warm drip down my face as his hand touched the screen. Just as I thought he would jump out of the computer out at me, the screen turned pitch black and the song faded out with one last note. Everything was silent in the room except our breathing. Suddenly a roar of clapping was heard coming from the computer, and I jumped back, finally breaking away from the trance and back into reality. Jeff and Emmy seemed to have been pulled back as well because they ran from the door and back to me. I sat at the computer screen in confusion, barely hearing anything. Their words were muffled and weak, and yet they still hurt my ears. I turned and noticed that Emmy was crying. I looked at Jeff. "Why is she crying?" I asked, taken aback at how low my own voice was. Jeff looked at me and grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the bathroom. He dragged me to the mirror and pointed. I looked at the small mirror in shocked horror. My face was pale, almost as white as Jeff's, but not quite. My ears were still there, but they had a small river of blood running down them, explaining how hard it was to hear, and my eyes held the same dead feeling that the boys did. I stared in terror at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked back, no emotions passing through the thick wall of my eyes. "This can't be happening," I said, touching my cheek. Jeff nodded. "It's happening all right." Emmy walked in just then. "Guys, you might want to see this," she said, looking weary and frightened. Jeff and I followed her back into the spare bedroom where I put the computer, and I noticed the computer had switched back on, but now the screen held no files. The only thing on it was a small timer slowly counting down the minutes to what I don't really know. We looked at each other uncertainly, and then back at the timer. "What is it counting down to?" I asked, the most obvious question. Jeff shrugged. "Count down till self-destruction," he asked, chuckling lightly at his own joke. I shuddered and noticed something else. "What the hell?" "It's not even plugged up," I said, picking the energy cable up and holding it where they could see. Emmy shuddered and stepped back. "We need to get rid of this computer," she said, shaking her head. I nodded and noticed her usually tan skin was a pale white, and her entire body seemed to be shaking. "I think you need to take a nap, Emmy," I said, softly touching her shoulder. The second I touched her, she collapsed. She fell limply to the ground, and a pool of blood spread around her as she paled even more, and all of the emotion drained from her face. All that was left was her eyes, now a dim green color, as they stared off into the distant nothingness. I let out a croaked scream and backed up, straight into Jeff. I spun and noticed that his features had contorted. He was no longer the happy-go-lucky teen I had known before. A huge grin spread across his pasty white skin, and his wide eyes were bordered with black. He chuckled darkly, and I stepped back, tripping over Emmy's body. What the hell are you?" I asked, tears streaming down my blood-stained cheeks. Jeff let out a small gasp as he realized I could see through his mask. But I didn't give him any more time to react. I jumped up and ran towards the door, slamming it behind me and running towards the woods next to my house. What the hell am I doing? I always get mad because in scary movies they run to the woods, but now here I am and I do the exact same thing. My legs burned with effort as I pushed myself onwards, trying to run as fast as possible. Suddenly, I swerved to the left and run smack into a large tree. I feel everything swirl around me, and then it was dark. I wake up a few minutes later and hear a crack from the woods around me. I sit up and terror runs through my veins like glass. Tears roll down my cheeks as I press my back to the tree, and I close my eyes, simply waiting for my end to come. I have no God to beg to. Even if I did believe in him, what were the odds I would make it to heaven with all the sins I have committed? I am sure that I have somehow managed to commit all of the 7 sins at least 5 times. Suddenly my heart began to pound loudly, so loud in fact that it drowned out all the sounds of the forest. Ba-dump, 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 ba-dump. I listened to the sound of it as I slowly began to feel sleepy. I opened my eyes and saw Jeff standing right in front of me. I couldn't think straight as I smiled at him. I felt so light and dreamy, almost like mist. Jeff gave me a huge smile and leaned down close so that his cheek touched mine and his breath tickled my ear. "That's right," he said softly, like a father tucking in his child. "Go to sleep." With those final words, he plunged a knife into my stomach. But I didn't even feel it as the countdown meter struck 0 and my eyes became dull. A ghost of a smile touched my face, and I looked at Jeff with a chillingly dead expression. "Good night, Jeff," I said, my voice a hoarse, scratchy sound. In the last second of my life, I saw a look of shock fly across Jeff's face as he looked at me. But then everything went dark.